There we go. Let's see if we've still got some water in here. Yeah. How's that?
Perfect. That's tea.
It's tea. Tea time. Tea time, Will. Let me tell you a story about a few trees. Hey, Will. I find this file. I'm not quite sure what to do about this. I find this file last night. Sure enough, in the file drawer, or just an old drawer, big trees, it's there. So what do we do? So,
what Phoebe is teasing me with is a page of coordinates given to her by Maywell before he passed on. On the sheet, there are 3 coordinates labeled big trees, and one stands out with a box around it and an arrow pointing to it.
there they are. Tips. Every hunt involves following tips. Might take you 2 years, because everybody will have a story and another tip along the way.
I'm going to pause Phoebe here for a second so we can look at what Eric's doing in the background. Despite having agreed that we're not going to look up the coordinates and go directly to them, because it's not what Maywell may have wanted, Eric has already typed the coordinates into his phone.
I can't believe you looked it up. The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah! All the coordinates lie within one valley on Didadat territory, named Quabadawa, or anglicized as Carmanah.
What is the value of big trees? I think probably their highest and best value is to draw attention to conservation opportunities, right? So the reason a lot of people were interested in the lower Carmanah or the Carmanah Valley as a protected area and didn't want to see it logged had to do with the very large Sitka spruce, and one Sitka spruce in particular, the Carmanah giant. And so that I think is the best example I can think of from British Columbia, where one tree has galvanized a movement that saved a valley.
We will follow the coordinates deep into the Carmanah Valley. But first we have to understand what we might be looking for. This is where Maywell first started looking for big trees. So much is to go on in the Carmanah in the late 80s and early 90s that will change the way Canada is viewed by the rest of the world, as well as our understanding of the temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest. All of this will be sparked by the myth a man named Michael Jai tells about finding a giant tree.
Some of those first big tree trips that we took with Maywell, it was before the cheewhat cedar tree. So it was looking for the Michael Jai spruce, the big spruce tree. And that's how a lot of us, maybe about 10 or 12 of us, often got invited on these trips. There was many trips to Carmanah looking for this tree because Maywell knew you could still miss it. I've got the notes from some of the people then who were young university students with Michael who were on a timber cruising summer job in Carmanah Valley. And their notes are really interesting, how they all remember the trees quite differently from each other, like 6 different perspectives.
These are Phoebe's notes on the search for a big tree in Carmanah Creek, a world record tree, a spruce tree recorded by Michael Jai to be 309 feet tall and 26 feet across. Randy Stolman, a well-known big tree author, was also bringing people into the valley. Phoebe tracked down every member of the surveying crew that was out with Michael Jai in the 1950s. They referred to it as the starvation camp because of a lack of food. None of them can back up Michael Jai's reports of a giant spruce, but one of them remembers a cedar so big that it took more than 2 diameter tapes to wrap it around. This cedar sounds like the size of Maywell's mystery tree, but maybe Big Tree is referring to Michael Jai's spruce. We won't know until we go to the coordinates.
But that stayed with Michael Guy for years, and would always tell people about this record tree in Carmanah. So that's why we all got there years later, well, maybe almost 30 years later, to try and find this huge spruce tree that was reported to be 26 feet in diameter. So that's big. Is he still alive?
Maybe we should find that out.
I have a funny feeling he might not be, but I could be wrong.
This is something you never see is somebody with a motorbike with the cane strapped to it.
That's right. That's right. He uses it to discipline other drivers. Actually.
No, it's actually to fight off the women off my body.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Yeah.
It's a 40-kilometer zone through there. On my Access R900, I could take those 3 corners at 104.
You know what we
And
have
you can see all the way around the first 3 corners, and if there's nothing coming, I just let her rip and use the whole road.
What we have here is the world's oldest juvenile delinquent.
That's exactly right. I like that.
Yeah.
I landed in Canada in 1955. It was June of 1955, that's right. And I picked up the job about 3 days after I landed. We were working off aerial photographs, which were flown at 16,000 feet. They were run in 1/3 acre plots, running uphill always. We had to tally every tree in each plot, getting the species, the height of the predominant trees and the dominant trees, species, diameter, breast height, color, stuff like that. I think there were 9 guys, so 3 crews of 3 with enough food to last for 2 weeks. And then they would fly in the other food and drop it by parachute. It was the first time they tried it. The result was that out of the 12 chutes that they sent down, only about 4 made it to the ground. The rest were probably still hanging up in the trees right now. So we had enough food for about a couple of weeks. So we wrote with branches we cut, we wrote SOS food on the sandbar in the hope that somebody would fly by and see how we were doing, but nobody did. So on this particular day when I found this tree, I was working from one area where I'd finished doing with my crew of 3 guys. We finished doing that and we were walking to the next site. And on walking past this huge tree that I saw, I said, God, I'm not going to walk past that without measuring it. So it was very difficult. It took us about over an hour to get a height because the tree was very closely forested. The trouble was you shooting the right top. The tallest Sitka spruce at those days, I looked it up later, was 276 feet. And I kept getting 309 feet. And so I thought, I'm obviously shooting the wrong top, getting a false, which is very easy. So we would move over and try again from another angle and another angle. Kept getting 309 feet. So that was how we discovered the tree. And I thought, I just made a note of the thing because it wasn't part of that particular job. We were just walking from one sampling, which we'd finished, to the next sample area. So.
The whole issue lay dormant for a number of years. Maywell asked me if I knew Michael. I said, yeah, absolutely, I know him very well. He said, well, he reported this giant spruce up in the Carmanah Valley. He said, is Michael credible? I said, if he says it's there, it's there. Then he said, would you be interested in flying in there with me? I said, sure, let's give it a shot. And so that's what precipitated this whole thing. We landed with a helicopter. There's a little wide spot, probably right there is the sandbar. We went in there with Angie and Harry Hammer.
Yeah, and the diameter is 12, 13. Oh. 12.6.
This is the beginning of people searching the Carmanah Valley for Michael Jai spruce. Eventually a spruce tree will be found by Macmillan Vlodell that is 312 feet tall, pretty much the same height as Michael Jai spruce. This makes it the tallest tree in Canada and the tallest Sitka spruce tree in the world. It will be called the Carmanah Giant.
When plans to log the Carmanah Valley became available to the general public and people started organizing to protest the logging of this valley, the focal point for a lot of the protests became the Carmanah Giant. When Macmillan Vlodell eventually realized that they weren't going to be able to go with Plan A, they said, okay, we will save the Carmanah Giant and a small grove around it. That didn't please anybody, so they said, okay, we will save a bigger area around it. And in the end, the BC government decided that they would save the lower half of the Carmanah Valley and log the upper half, which will surely stand as one of the worst decisions ever made by a BC government, because it's an incredibly active river with an incredibly active floodplain. So if you save the bottom half and log the upper half, then for sure the river would change its course and take out some of these groves of big trees. So our advice was to do anything but that, and that's what the minister decided to do. Which, and then began the fight for saving the upper Carmanah. The intent was to establish a research presence in the part of the Carmanah that people intended to log. I was working for the Forest Service as a researcher and actually got some Forest Service research funding to support Neville Winchester's PhD studies in the upper Carmanah.
I was struck by the size of the trees. I absolutely had never seen anything like that. And then the sort of entomologist, insect person in me decided to look up. Because if you look way up in a sunlit sort of day, you see tons of insect activity in the canopy. And so I just said, yeah, wouldn't it be great to see what those were? And that's the story of essentially the start of getting up in the canopy. And once I got up there, I realized this is unique habitat. You don't find it anywhere else.
Despite a fear of heights, Neville would work with the Wilderness Committee to build a series of platforms that would allow him to get 70 meters up into the canopy of the spruce trees in Carmanah.
Well, for me, because I don't like heights, it was nerve-wracking. You can't tell that you're like 40 meters up off the ground. Oh my gosh. Like they're Burma bridges, but I call them bungee bridges because they sort of swayed back and forth so much.
When they got to the tops of these spruce trees, they discovered a world, one that was unexpectedly complex.
These separate arboreal ecosystems, and they're not a subset of the ground, they're totally new. Previous to the work that we did, we absolutely had no record at all. No one had any idea that there were big, thick soil mats at the tops of these trees. These moss mats have this community of arthropods. We focused in on these orbat or beetle mites. And there were new species after new species, and that's the only place they were found. there's a lot of unique species associated with unique habitat that is only found in these ancient forest canopies.
After finding an abundance of new species, Neville wondered if the ecosystem varied based on the height it was in the tree and the age and complexity of the tree's canopy.
So we stratified the tree, and that's why we have the platforms at different levels. So we could sample at different levels, see if there's any sort of stratification. And there was, for sure. It's incredible. There's differences in insect communities or arthropod communities between the different levels.
Wow.
So I never expected that.
Wow.
72 meters is way different than 30, and all of this, of course, is way different than being on the ground. And also, the older the tree, for most parts, provides different structures for build-up of things like moss mats, nesting platforms, you name it. So if you have a 3,000-year-old tree out there, it would be more habitat complexity in that tree than a 1,000-year-old tree. And a 1,000-year-old tree would have more habitat complexity than a 100-year-old tree farm, like the second growth tree.
Neville's research would reveal a whole new world high in the treetops of our coastal temperate rainforests. His research, along with an aggressive publicity campaign in the midst of the War of the Woods, would bring international attention to the Carmanah and eventually put enough pressure on the provincial government that they would protect the entire valley, as well as the lower half of the Walbrand in the Carmanah-Walbrand Provincial Park.
So where is the Carmanah giant located on this?
Down here.
Down there, okay.
Yeah, it's right down where the valley gets really steep. And you thought that maybe it was down in here. Well, you were certainly in the right direction from where the landing spot was. But I do remember you said that you guys tried to make it down here, but that it was just prohibitively steep and slippery.
Okay, it's 12:30 o'clock, and I'm just realizing what Michael's been saying to me as I edit this film. And so Michael finding this giant tree sparked people like Maywell and Randy Stolman and others to go into the Carmanah Valley and start searching for a giant, super big, super tall spruce tree. And they'd eventually find one, the Carmanah giant. It's then assumed that Michael was describing the Carmanah giant. But here's the thing, as I watch this, things aren't adding up. Michael says he's doing plots up the valley, so they're ascending in elevation. He says in between plots, he came across this tree, and then when he went to measure it, it was very difficult to find the crown amongst other crowns. If you know anything about the Carmanah giant, you know that it sits along the river itself and stands out distinctly because there's almost no trees around it. It's actually in a sandstone canyon. The final straw is this moment right here where I read out the description of the Carmanah giant.
17. Carmanah giant, world's tallest known Sitka spruce and the tallest known tree in Canada. 10 feet diameter.
That's wrong.
10 feet diameter is wrong.
Yeah.
And 312 feet tall.
The DBH was 16.5 feet.
So it's the diameter.
Right. If you come across a tree that size, you don't forget it, believe me.
Yeah.
You remember everything about it because it's such an astonishing size.
It's like remembering an ex-wife. No matter how much you want to forget her, you can't. Believe me, I know. I hope that's not going to be.
Oh, that's going to be a
perfect. Perfect. I may wind up with 3 ex-wives if I get my cards right.
If we don't believe that Michael found the Carmanah giant, then we can't put this mystery to rest. And because his lore around this tree led to the preservation of the entire valley, it's more than likely that his tree hasn't been cut down and is still out there. To be found, I suppose.
another group who's also looking for Maywell's tree has come out here, who over the winter contacted Maywell's grandson and are on the hunt for Maywell's tree. And so right now we're following the coordinates that we got from Phoebe into the Carmanah Valley. And on the exact same day, that same group who's also looking for Maywell's tree has come to the valley.
Prominence there. Another big canopy, another big clump there. See that one? Interesting. And there's a big cedar right there, look at that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and that's that right there.
And it's much steeper than here.
God. This forest is not what I was hoping for.
Or I just don't think that cedar's that big. You know? Unless we hit something promising side slope, do we got to go to that, or are we feeling like maybe we should?
No.
After all that drama, the coordinates ended up being a bust, with no real trees around them. We did chance into something fun though. Without following any coordinates, we bumped into the Siamese tree, one of the trees in the 5 photos given to Andy
It starts
by
as 2
Maywell.
trees, and it joins over and becomes 1. But Maywell was always puzzled. What were the precedents to that, right? So he would take pictures of these and then show them to all his forestry friends, maybe even Andy. But a lot of people couldn't explain what Maywell was. Did I ever show you the notes of searching for the big tree at Carmanah?
Phoebe's document concludes in a funny way that I think speaks to the whole idea of this quest. No big tree? Let's forget it? No. Not likely, but let's go back and put the matter to rest? Yes. Maybe worth one more look? No. It seems like a contradiction here, where they don't believe that there's no big tree. Also, it's not worth one more look. But they're still going to go back and put the matter to rest. I don't know what to say. Looking at this document, it seems like they couldn't have found much more conclusive evidence that the tree isn't there. And yet, they hang on to some hope that it's out there. And I think it's for this same reason that I still believe it's worth searching for. This is the Carmanah giant. It's the tallest tree in Canada. That just came out brown.
Yeah, it just went up my nose. Ooh, the Carmanah, the tallest tree in Canada. And it just immediately sparks this like mini fever in people that are into that kind of thing. And they're just like, ooh, I want to go check it out. I want to go explore it. I want to go see it for myself.